Full of birds and mammals and stars, the Sea of Cortez once showcased the greatest marine diversity in the world.
Almost lost this one.
Due to human actions and inactions, that exuberance of life has altered as stocks and resources plummeted. Now, local fishermen and an international team are working together to bring the brimming life back to the Sea of Cortez.
Next year in Marawata.
Funding for The Desert Speaks was provided by Desert Program Partners, representing concerned viewers making a financial commitment to the education about and preservation of deserts, and by the Stonewall Foundation.
In 1940, marine biologist Ed Ricketts and novelist John Steinbeck teamed up to do a study of the Sea of Cortez. Their report describes coastline and islands teeming with terrestrial and marine wildlife. That abundance is now much reduced, and the loss is of deep concern to conservationists.
The Sea of Cortez is a narrow body of ocean 800 miles long, with desert on all sides and over 900 desert islands popping up throughout. The decline and even collapse of marine organisms has brought aboard a boat, a group of scientists together with specialists from the Arizona-Sonora Desert Museum to check the status of some species and see what can be done. Unlike the Steinbeck and Ricketts trip, we have a modern boat with a crew who have spent most of their lives navigating the Gulf of California, another name for the Sea of Cortez.
The depth of the sea varies a lot. In places it's over half a mile deep, in others it's very shallow, even right in the middle. All of our instruments make navigation easier during the day or at night. Experience, though, allows us to look at rock forms, jetties, the shape of islands, to pick out a good path. Sometimes strong winds make it impossible to navigate these waters.
In Steinbeck and Ricketts' time, sea turtles were abundant. Now, visitors are lucky to see any at all, and those rare sightings are usually associated with research projects. Sea turtles are keystone species. If they are doing poorly, then a multitude of other organisms are in jeopardy as well. No one knows this better than Jeff Seminoff, who works with local fishermen on an international conservation project.
Right. One kawama coming up.
Beautiful animal, look at that. Rodrigo and Miriam are both members of the Grupo Tortuguero. And every month they put nets in the water to try and capture animals. Okay, and on 3 we're gonna lift it out, okay? And the idea is if we do these capture efforts every month for a long period of time, and hopefully 10 years or more, we can get some idea of whether the population is increasing or decreasing. And having an understanding of whether the population is increasing or decreasing can really tell us about how successful the conservation efforts have been.
I think turtles have a strangeness but an innocent appeal, and because for the most part they're not aggressive at all, people really love turtles, and it's hard not to be happy to see they're doing better than they were.
More and more we're seeing turtles repopulating areas here in the Gulf where they were gone for 2 decades.
Are there protection against poaching? Are they being effective, or are they still, is that still a big problem?
Here in the Gulf, I think the conservation is still very much a grassroots effort. It's really centered in the communities where the Grupo Tortuguero is active, the sea turtle group of the Californias. But there's still a big problem with poaching. It's primarily people from the mainland that actually come across, set their nets, and extract a huge ponga load of turtles and head back. So it's not the locals necessarily that are doing the most damage.
You can still, in many markets, particularly along the coast, you can find people advertising, openly selling cara de caguama, turtle meat, which is still a delicacy, and that's got to be a disincentive toward conservation.
Absolutely.
They're worth a lot.
And you consider all the vigilance that's going on at our own U.S. border, yet we can still get fresh sea turtle meat in Tucson, Arizona.
Yeah, that's right. So we have a way to go.
We have a way to go, but we're definitely on the right track.
Yeah, that's terrific.
These turtles are ocean connectors. They're moving between places here in the Gulf of California with nesting beaches 1,000 miles south. So it's a conservation mosaic of sorts in that you have people working here in the foraging areas, people protecting the nesting beaches, also others just trying to do environmental education to get the word out that it's not okay to eat sea turtles.
Conservation involves more than simply protecting and counting individuals. It also involves intense recording of data and monitoring, hands-on intimacy with the turtles.
And you see right now he's got his eyes open, looking straight ahead. And they can be somewhat unpredictable. So what we're going to do right now, just to keep him calm while we're doing some of the measuring, kind of cover up his eyes. Just keeps him a lot calmer.
Here on
the island of Pardito, we've been monitoring sea turtles for a year now, but we've been involved with educational enrichment projects for over 3 years.
So as we go through this whole process here, we're measuring head width, shell length. We'll do something called a body depth. We'll measure the tail length, get a weight on the animal, mark it with flipper tags so that we can identify this individual if we recapture it again at some later date.
Steinbeck and Ricketts' written account is one version of the history of the Gulf. An added dimension is available from people who have lived here for many decades and personally experienced the plummeting of turtle populations. Andrea Sain Ciroyo is a Mexican scientist who specializes in interviewing those old-timers.
I think one of the reasons why the Gulf of California until last century was still one of the most richest places in the northern hemisphere, it's because it was inhabited by very small and rural communities that were acting and approaching the sea still as hunter-gatherers. No? So they were affecting the ecosystem, but it was not industrialized. It was not. Many species didn't have a market until the 1950s, 1960s. If you interview a person 60 or 70 years old, still he will have in his head like large numbers of whales, large numbers of sharks, groupers that were of your size or my size, no? And turtles that were just like pumping from the surface. No? The strong depletion or the deep depletion, it's still in our living memory.
Successful conservation efforts for the Sea of Cortez must begin by mobilizing the people who live on the shores of the Gulf and depend on its resources for their livelihood.
Fishing camps along the coast, pretty much around the entire Gulf of California. In some places they have electricity, or some places they have fresh water, some places they have nothing. They have to bring everything from big ports like La Paz or Guaymas. And some of the fishing camps are temporary, some are permanent.
So these little villages are able to sustain themselves just fishing from the Gulf?
Less and less every time. They either follow species that are migratory, and when the corrida, that's the migration of the species, ends, the camp has to leave. They have to take the camp back to where they live. But in other permanent camps, they switch from different fisheries, different products. What the best fishing is what mostly drives the fishing activity.
How are the fishing stocks holding out?
With some species, the populations are really low. I would say sharks, are pretty much overfish, large sharks mostly, like hammerheads, bull sharks, also large manta rays. All the species that we call top predators have been wiped out.
The tiny waterless island called El Pardito, in reality it's just a large rock, has been home to a fishing family for 70 years. That family is a key component in protecting sea turtles and other marine resources of the Gulf.
Pues yo nací en La Paz.
I was born on the peninsula in La Paz on October 22, 1940. I was 1 month old when they brought me here. Right now there are 5 generations here, all living off of fishing the local waters. We're currently catching Angelito, but when those numbers dwindle, we move on to other species, so no one species suffers.
Around this island, one of the advantages that the Cuevas family have is that they've been kind of the guardians of these waters around the islands. In a way, they patrol their own fishing areas, they prevent the access of foreign fishermen or big boats, so they've been taking good care of the waters around here.
What's happened is that there hasn't been any enforcement of the laws. For example, we have permission to fish here, but others don't. They are the ones that overfish these waters to dangerous levels. I remember, even as a small child, that there has never been enforcement. Fish levels are way down and it's not getting better. The sea turtle almost vanished here, up until they became protected, which was almost too late. My nephew Felipe is actively involved in the monitoring program, which measures and weighs the turtles. In 1 year, I believe we have captured, processed, and released over 50 turtles. Sea turtles are part of the culture, the tradition of Baja California, because of the historical consumption. But because of the dangerous decline of turtle populations, we're stepping up our efforts to stop this. A healthy sea turtle population is so important to the Gulf because they measure the health of the ecosystem. They migrate up and down these waters, and if they're healthy, then the sea as a whole is healthy too.
The greatest technology that we use these days is something called satellite telemetry. And we actually apply small satellite tags to the backs of these turtles or to the shells, the carapace of the animals. And the idea here is to attach an instrument, and when we release that turtle with that instrument, every time it comes to the surface, it sends a signal to orbiting satellites to determine the long distance movements of turtles, because I can apply a tag on a turtle, go back to my office and actually get email messages each day from the satellite manufacturer telling me the latitude and longitude of the animal. There we are. Nice and easy.
The richness of the Sea of Cortez extends not just to its cold, deep waters, but to tide pools as well. The creatures there are just as vulnerable to overharvesting as are the fish, marine mammals, and sea turtles, the creatures of the deep.
It was really when Ed Ricketts began his work in the 1930s in California exploring tide pools just like this that we began to understand this field that we now call marine ecology. In fact, the word ecology didn't even exist at that time. And it was through an understanding of tide pools that we came to understand food webs and predator-prey systems and how all of these animals interact to create a whole.
There's 4,000 tide pools in here.
At least, and every time there's a low tide, every single day these are revealed. Look at the size of this one. These are the most prolific breeders in the world's seas. Each breeding season, these sea urchins will actually release upwards of 10 million fertilized eggs.
Other creatures are gobbling them up
Yeah.
almost as quickly as they put them out.
Exactly, exactly. Only in a tide pool will you find a veritable encyclopedia of invertebrate life. And just about every phylum of life that's ever been described you can find in a tide pool.
Oh, there's a flatworm. Oh, look at that.
This guy is only about 4 cells thick. This is a very thin, fragile animal. This is a very, very primitive animal. This is the very base of the evolution of the animal kingdom. The blob, it creeps, it crawls along the walls.
Jack, you must be careful of the blob.
This is a very different sea star.
It is. This is a multi-armed sea star, and they call it the sun star, and it's pretty famous in the Sea of Cortez. These are the top carnivores of the tide pools. These are the lions and tigers of the tide pools. These don't look much like the typical sea anemone.
Oh, they're small.
And they just reproduce by budding off new ones next to it. They kind of split in half and develop new little anemones. These kinds of environments where you have two very different worlds, in this case the terrestrial world and the marine world, coming together, are called ecotones. And in these kinds of settings you tend to get an enhanced biodiversity, and that's exactly what we see in these tide pools. There are literally thousands of species of invertebrates and fishes living in these tide pools in the Sea of Cortez. This is beautiful. This is one of the larger serpent stars.
Serpent?
Serpent. Look at the way the legs move. Very snake-like. These actually have vertebrae-like bones in the legs and the arms, identical to the backbone, the vertebrae of the backbone of a snake, of a real serpent.
Oh, look what just came out. I think it's a fireworm.
There's a little bit of I wouldn't call it a venom, but it's kind of a noxious substance that irritates some people. I'm kind of used to them. They don't really bother
so
me.
that is offensive to predators and gives them that protection?
Very good predator defense. Some of these fireworms will reach 10 inches in length. They really do become quite large. This is probably a 1-year-old juvenile. Now there is a beautiful animal.
That's a beautiful animal, huh?
Look at the shape. It's really just a bag of water, and he's pretty pumped up with water right now. Seagulls are about the only animals around here that will eat sea cucumbers. They're not very edible or tasty. They're a bit like jellyfish. It's just gelatinous bags of water. But they have a function and actually a very important role in tide pool habitats and tide pool ecology, because they really keep this sediment from getting fouled.
We hear a lot about the depletion of the fish stocks in the Gulf of California, and it's quite true. But there's still a lot of sardines around. These are brown pelicans. They seem to flourish along the Gulf of California, and there are many, many hundreds of thousands of them up and down the coast. They're large birds, and it takes a lot of food to sustain them. And the pelicans somehow figure out when the schools arrive, and when they're trapped in a cove, like this cove, the pelicans get the word out and they come by the hundreds. Sometimes they have to get fairly high to get enough power to get down to get the sardines, but they know just what they have to do. After a while, they get so full that they can't fly, and so they have to wait by the shore and digest it until they can take off and hope that the sardines haven't left.
Almost anyone who has spent a lot of time in the waters of the Gulf makes the same observation about its decline. Ecotourist guide Tim Means believes one important tool in reestablishing the richness of the Gulf is to take people there and show them.
25 years ago, you could get off in this bay back here and you'd look down in the water and you could see big groupers moving around in the rocks, but that doesn't happen anymore. There's very few of the big groupers left. Now, those things are 300-400 years old.
You know a lot about conservation efforts, what's going on. How do you see the place in 20 years from now?
Hopefully it'll be something that will be like the Galapagos, that the Mexican government can promote as a natural protected area that's large enough that people will want to come and see. Idea of a preserve that stretches along the coast and the offshore waters, that, you know, that's a huge area to promote for tourism. I think it's probably a better bet than developing everywhere. And that's what a lot of people come here for, to see something that's still relatively natural.
As the rest of the world gets less and less wild.
Yeah.
Ricketts and Steinbeck noted that one type of marine mammal seemed to be drawn to humans: dolphins. Humans may have wrought havoc in the Gulf, but dolphins are forgiving, and they still love to play.
Well, these are bottlenose dolphins. They're very common in the Sea of Cortez. You can find them in really close to the shore or very deep water. When a boat is cruising like we are now, they come and approach the bow because the water that the boat is displacing is pushing ahead. So they use that force to propel themselves. Sometimes they travel for miles with the boat. It's like taking a ride, a free ride. And sometimes you see lots of them, like 10 or 12, and they keep like pushing to get the best position in front of the boat, so you can actually see them kind of fighting and sometimes jumping out of the water, clear out of the water, like maybe 8-10 feet out of the water.
And we're doing about 10 miles an hour, and they can easily do what? 25,
20, 25, yeah. In a very short periods of time, they can just take off. And the dorsal fin really helps them to
stabilize.
Yeah, stabilize. The pectoral fins, so the front flippers, they're like the wings of an airplane. They can really turn fast. And they call bottlenose dolphins because the shape of the head looks like a bottle, like an old pipe bottle.
All of the damage that human beings have done to them, they still seem to have this affection for people.
With marine mammals, we have a lot of connections. I mean, they live in a world that is very, very different than ours.
Yeah.
But we connect as mammals, a very intelligent mammals.
So does the depletion of the fishing stock in the Gulf, does that harm the dolphin population?
Well, for species like bottlenose dolphins that have a wide variety of food items, it's not as bad. They feed on pelagic or fish that are close to the surface, but they also feed on fish that are in the bottom. Yeah, like flounders and halibut, those kind of things.
So they probably like the same fish that we do.
Yeah. You remember watching Flipper when you were a kid?
Wait, how can you not? I wouldn't, look, not when I was a kid, when I was a
kid.
young adult, when you were a kid. That's right.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to be a biologist, marine biologist, after watching Flipper. And Flipper was the same species, bottlenose dolphin.
The dolphins led us back to the panga, and the researchers with the green sea turtle that's ready to be released. All the possible measurements have been taken, and it's time to send him off and wait for signals from his transmitter.
Turtles are incredibly important to the human population here in the Gulf. Today, more so, it's just a cultural icon. I consider it one of the keystone species for the local conservation efforts here in the Gulf of California. And in years past, turtles were used for food and medicinal purposes, but today they really represent the cohesive conservation efforts that are going on throughout the Gulf. I'm very optimistic with what I'm seeing right now. Populations here in the Gulf, populations at nesting beaches down in southern Mexico are all on a slight increase. So that tells me that we just have to redouble our efforts to conserve these animals in all the component habitats, be it the foraging areas up north here, the migratory corridors, and even the nesting beaches down south. What we hope is that someday these populations will recover and actually occupy their ecological roles from the past.
Next year in Marawata.
I think that a big element in all this shift that needs to happen is for the government to recognize that the best stewards for the fisheries are the fishermen. If they overexploit the sea, they basically history. They have to move somewhere else. But if they do a good management, if they're good stewards of the resource, they're also sustainable communities. So sustainable human communities depend on sustainable fisheries.
God gave me life, and when He wants, He'll take it back. But until then, I'll be here on this island until I die.
Ed Ricketts and John Steinbeck found the Sea of Cortez nearly pristine and brimming with biological diversity. Scientists, conservationists, and even government officials now agree that the Gulf can be made to be the way it was when Ricketts and Steinbeck first saw it nearly 70 years ago. but only with increased law enforcement and, even more important, with the cooperation of tourists and fishermen.
A desert island may seem like a most inhospitable place. Hot, dry, isolated. Yet for the animals and plants that call it home, there's no other place like it in the world.
Did the French build this little berm here?
And for some, there are no other creatures like them anywhere. They're one of a kind. Next time on The Desert Speaks.
Alegres o tristes salen de Ensenada, los barcos pesqueros se van a buscar. Las preciadas piezas que a veces se encuentran y hay que otros encuentran la muerte en el mar.
Funding for The Desert Speaks was provided by Desert Program Partners, representing concerned viewers making a financial commitment to the education about and preservation of deserts, and by the Stonewall Foundation,